Marathon. This is the result of one of the most famous FPS game studios on the planet, taking years to reinvent one of their obscure 90s sci-fi series into a modern, hardcore extraction shooter. It is visually wild, unlike anything you've ever seen before. It's got punishing PvPvE Technicolor combat, and it asks fans to pony up about $40 to risk it all for purple-colored loot on an alien planet. And now that it's finally here, well, the question is, was the launch good enough to keep Marathon around for the long run? Now, I'm a big fan of Bungie and games that actually try something new, which in this case Marathon did with its art style and ambitious backstory. Obviously though, I am biased. I love Bungie, I want this game to succeed. But even the best intentions from Bungie and their hardcore fanbase will not guarantee success. I want to actually unpack all the facts here and see if we can get any closer to understanding whether or not Marathon's actually going to go the distance. Now, in an alternate timeline, Marathon is still just a classic max shooter from the mid-90s. However, in our timeline, it is the project Bungie poured at least 5 years into while juggling Destiny 2 expansions, layoffs, and a creative overhaul. Roughly about 300 developers were on this project for about half a decade, and some estimates pegged the core development cost at around $250 million. That's before advertising. Again, this is an estimate, but if it's even close, that is a massive chunk of money. Sony desperately needs its investment to pay off. They bought Bungie for $3.6 billion, and clearly live service revenue is part of that plan. Meanwhile, Destiny 2 has been struggling with player numbers, so all that live service rev pressure now seems to be largely sitting on Marathon's shoulders. Now, the run-up to Marathon's release was messy. Early alpha tests drew harsh feedback, which prompted a delay of the game, and Bungie weathered a bunch of layoffs, some art plagiarism drama, and even leadership shakeups. But when they finally showed the revamped game, opinions started to shift. The art actually looked really good. The gunplay felt like classic Bungie, and the promise of a Bungie quality extraction shooter started to get people much more intrigued. Their free launch, free-to-play Server Slam peaked at around 143,000 concurrent players on Steam, a huge success, unless of course your game has a budget in the hundreds of millions, in which case, well, you need to be shooting even higher than that, which is kind of crazy. And when the game launched on March 5th, Marathon topped out at around 88,000 concurrent players on Steam. And that's respectable, especially considering that everyone playing the game had to actually buy it for the retail price, but it is far from blockbuster territory, and the console sales haven't been disclosed either. Analysts estimate that roughly 2 million copies sold across all platforms in the first week. But with a rumored total budget north of $340 million, that's when we add in the advertising fees, well, number nerds would argue that the game needs around 12 to 15 million copies sold just to break even. Now, let me stress that these figures are far from official. We could be off significantly here, but I think we can say with some certainty that the break-even territory for Marathon is not happening anytime soon, even if their budget is 50% of our original estimate. Now, the good news here is that the game is good. People are liking it. I think it's got a lot of merit to it. On Steam, the user score sits at around 90%. People are praising the tense core loop, Bungie's signature gunplay feel, and just generally speaking, the art itself. Still though, the game is far from flawless. Pretty much everybody agrees that the UI is quite clunky, the tutorial leaves newcomers a bit lost, and the Battle Pass offers poor value compared to other games. And while we might expect AAA studios to very slowly come around and remedy these solutions, Bungie has already responded by boosting the premium currency in bundles and promising shop and quality of life fixes. They've even patched the game very quickly. Now, if we start to look at the retention numbers of Marathon, and remember, we're only a little over a week in, but they're not too bad. Sure, they dropped a little bit from launch day, but there seems to be enough content there that it's still only a slight dip. And this kind of dip is pretty typical of most games. But when you contrast this with, say, Arc Raiders, which still averages a 250,000 plus players, it saw growth after launch, and it sold 12 million copies, well, this is a stark contrast. Compared with that juggernaut, Marathon's early momentum looks absolutely pitiful. Now, despite all this, players are definitely having a lot of fun with the game, and a lot of the community is really praising Bungie for giving it such a big PvP focus, where Ark is more PvE focused. There's also a good amount of buzz around the upcoming content like the Cryo Archive. And Bungie has a long history of iterating and improving on their titles post-launch. Destiny's expansions like the Taken King turned that franchise completely around. We just don't know if Marathon will actually get that kind of runway. Many fans are hoping that word of mouth and steady updates could grow a loyal community the way that, say, Warframe did or Deep Rock Galactic did. And I certainly wouldn't count Marathon out. Live service shooters can lead to spectacular flops or unexpected comebacks. People are used to publishers pulling the plug on these projects if the numbers don't climb. Yet, if they did that with every project, then we wouldn't have games like Rainbow Six Siege. Back in 2015, it launched with weak sales and mixed reviews, but Ubisoft stuck with it. Giving it regular updates and balance tweaks transformed it into a premier multiplayer shooter with over 70 million registered players in record concurrency years after its release. Siege shows that when devs believe in their game and give it the proper support, then a post-launch comeback is absolutely a possibility. Truly though, just comparing the game to Ark Raiders is possibly the hardest statistic for Marathon to actually deal with. Ark was a smash hit out of the gate. It reached peak concurrency around 264,000 players, sold millions of copies, and now boasts tens of millions of active players. Embark nailed its fundamentals and monetization right off the bat, so the comparisons are just simply inevitable here, even if the games aim for slightly different audiences. There's also the aspect that Ark Raiders literally upset the entire gaming market. It sort of caused the paradigm shift in the PvPvE genre. The AI enemies in Ark Raiders are such a genuine threat to everyone in the server that they just changed up how we all view AI enemies. Every firefight with either Ark or players is a calculated risk in that game, with a unique outcome where the AI enemies could rip you apart if you're not careful. By comparison, in Marathon, most of the UESC AI are some form of bipedal humanoid with more or less HP and different tiers of shields. By traditional AI standards, they're pretty darn capable. They'll flank you, they'll climb ladders, and they'll charge you and stuff like that, but there's just no argument that they're far less interesting to fight than Ark. They are still challenging and they will kill you, but that usually comes from traditional AI ramp-ups, where they just increase the number of them that you're fighting and you get overwhelmed. Certainly some parallels with Destiny's design here. It seems like Marathon's best path forward to differentiate itself and sort of cater to a different audience is the more hardcore PvP route, as Ark is just miles ahead when it comes to PvE. Who knows, maybe Marathon could catch up here, but they'd have to do a lot of work. Now, Bungie has mapped out a loose 2026 content pipeline. Season 1, Death is the First Step, will run through June with new factions, shells, multiple zones, and a ranked queue. Season 2, Nightfall, will follow with more gear, a cradle system for stat tuning, and a nighttime map variant. And each season will wipe progression, a controversial decision meant to keep the playing field more level, which goes against Ark's approach here. We'll see how fans react to this in the long run. Now, I know we're barely over a week into Marathon's launch, so taking bets on Marathon's future is a blindfolded dart throw at best.
Okay, last one.
While many people were predicting Marathon's launch to be a disaster, it is absolutely not that. It does have an 88,000 player peak on Steam, which is respectable, maybe not in the AAA tier as much, but it's also got glowing reviews. The gunplay is top tier, the art is unlike anything you've ever seen before, and if you vibe with the risk-reward loop, there is a lot to love there. If there's any one thing wrong with this title, it's probably the studio's budget. Most of their extraction shooter competitors are operating on a budget a quarter, if not less, of what they spent on this game. Those trailers and cutscenes alone are insane. They look crazy cool and I love them, but I mean, God, they must have cost them massive. Comparing it to Arc Raiders, which is estimated to have a total budget of $75 million, which includes marketing as well. If our estimated total budgets are even close to accurate, that would mean that Arc Raiders had less than a quarter of Bungie's budget. So while 1 million copies sold in 1 week is impressive, the game would need many more sales and a thriving microtransaction ecosystem to even break even. And the slight drop in concurrent players suggests word of mouth alone might not cut it. Bungie may have to operate extremely lean, push meaningful updates quickly, and overhaul the battle pass to meet player expectations. Sony would also have to be extremely patient with them, and considering their now ridiculous legacy of failed and canceled titles in recent years, I'm not sure how much more patience they'll have, even for a studio as legendary as Bungie. Could Marathon pull a Rainbow Six Siege? Maybe. Siege recovered because Ubisoft supported it relentlessly. Bungie has a history of improving its games post-launch, but now they answer to Sony, and the presence of a wildly popular competitor like Arc Raiders only raises that bar. Marathon doesn't need to dethrone Arc Raiders, but it does need to carve out a distinct niche and probably reduce its operating costs to get there. It's got a more hardcore nature, more interesting lore, great gunplay. It just needs a little time to cook and hone in on what it does best. And Bungie's moving fast to patch and appease. The game's first update addressed many of my biggest concerns with the server slam playtest, which was really refreshing to see, and they're already teasing the next major content update coming at the end of the month with a whole alternate reality game that the community seems to be really interested in. So clearly Bungie have a plan to keep improving, evolving, and expanding Marathon, but I think it really, at this point, just comes down to a financial situation and how much runway they're given. Clearly, you guys know where I stand at this point. Obviously, I'm a fanboy, and I'm talking about a game that could potentially make or break one of my favorite game studios of all time. I think I've explored this subject pretty deeply at the moment, but I'd also be curious to hear your insights. Am I overlooking something? Is there a different angle to think about here? Do you think Marathon is going to actually make it in the long run? Let me know in the comments. And up next, check out this video exploring the recent Battlefield 6 layoffs, and probably the real reason why it's all happening. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.